I was lost as to whether the president was presenting the state of the nation or the future of the nation. I heard more about the future of the nation that he was contemplating in 4 years, and less of the state that our economy is and our country is at this point in time. Mr. Speaker, I realize that very key issues regarding our country were missing from his presentation. Under page 3, paragraph 4, His Excellency the President, when he attempted to indicate the state of our economy, all he did was to give us the targets that we had revised, but failed to tell us where we are with those targets at this moment in time. And for me, that ought to be the state of the country. And with your permission, I would like to read. He says, indeed, the cost of the COVID-19 has been enormous. Our overall economic growth rate for 2020 was revised downwards from 6.8 to 0.9. He didn't tell us where we are now. He says the non-oil economy was also revised from 6.7 to 1.6. Where we are, he didn't tell us. He said revenue shortfall was estimated at 13.5 billion, with additional expenditure relating to stemming the tide of COVID-19 estimated at 11.8 billion. Where we are, he didn't tell us. With the combined effect amounting to 25.3 billion, or 6.6% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, everybody would have thought that he would tell us where we are now in respect of these indicators, but he said nothing. But even more worrying was the fact that when the president attempted indicating some of the indicators that he thought we had achieved during his term, he fell short of telling us exactly what he has achieved in that period. And Mr. Speaker, on the same page, paragraph 2, he says, Mr. Speaker, between 2017 and the first quarter of 2020, and we are dealing with first quarter of 2021, the President is giving us the state as at first quarter of 2020. And he says, we had made considerable gains in the management of the national economy, where we witnessed annual average growth, GDP growth of 7%, single-digit inflation, reduced fiscal deficit with 3 consecutive years of primary surpluses, a relatively stable exchange rate, a significant improvement in the current account with 3 consecutive years of trade surpluses. Mr. Speaker, this cannot be far from the truth. Through the IMF to access the $1 billion relief fund, our indicators were quite clear. Mr. Speaker, we reported that in 2018, our GDP was 6.3%. We reported that in 2019, our GDP grew by 6.1%. And we indicated that 2020, we expect a GDP of 1.5%. Mr. Speaker, no amount of mathematics will give you an average of 7% of GDP growth from a figure of 6.3, 6.1, and 1.5. And yet the President looks us in the face and says that he has recorded an average GDP of 7%. I don't know where that figure is coming from. And that figure is alien to its own, the government's own report that it has published internationally. Mr. Speaker, he also says that we have achieved less than 5% overall deficit in the last 3-4 years. Mr. Speaker, from the same report, we indicate that our deficit in 2018 was 7%, our deficit in 2019 was 7.5%, and Mr. Speaker, our deficit as revised in 2020 is expected at 11.6%. So, Mr. Speaker, none of this shows any deficit of below 5%. As a matter of fact, the least that he had achieved from this data is 7%, and 7% is nowhere near a minimum of 5% or less that he has achieved. Mr. Speaker, our private balance as reported to the IMF also shows that we had a negative 1.4% in 2018, a negative 1.8% in 2019, and a negative 4.1% in 2020. And yet the President says we have recorded primary balance surpluses consistently for 3 years. That is not supported by the facts. And that is where I get very worried. But Mr. Speaker, he talked also about our net international reserves, which has improved. And I don't see how a net international reserve that can support only 2 months would be seen as a better improvement in the economy. But Mr. Speaker, the economy is in a very dire situation. Mr. Speaker, the President was at pains to explain that he was running a robust economy until COVID-19 ravaged that economy. Mr. Speaker, from the data I have just presented, it is quite clear that we are running an economy with underlying severe conditions that COVID-19 just exploited to kill it. And so just like COVID-19, people get COVID-19 and they survive, but others get it and they die. Our economy is in this state because of the underlying conditions that we're hiding from the true state of our economy, which was an economy that was running unsustainable deficit, an economy that was running unsustainable GDP growth, an economy that was running unsustainable deficit in private balance. And all of this was clouded as positive development, and COVID-19, exploiting these underlying conditions, decided to now finish our economy. And the earlier we realize that, the better. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency says that he is going to revive this economy by introducing what we call a 100 billion Obatampa program. And Mr. Speaker, under page 5, paragraph 1, he said, Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has exposed the need to expedite the process of moving Ghana to a situation beyond aid. That is why government has developed and is currently implementing the 100 billion CD Ghana Cares Obatampa program to transform the economy, revitalize the economy, and to achieve a turnaround in the economy. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, His Excellency the President just spent 108 billion Ghana cedis, and he did not transform the economy with 108 billion in 1 year. How does that 108 billion now spent over 3 years revive an economy like that? And so quite clearly, the 100 billion is chicken feed for a government that is used to spending 100 billion in 1 year. And yet we are being told to have hope that this time around, that same 100 billion that we spent in 1 year, when it is now spent over a period of 3 years, something meaningful will come out of it. Mr. Speaker, I have no hope that the 100 billion of our Tampa program will deliver any success in turning around the economy. But Mr. Speaker, the President spoke extensively on digitization of our economy. And His Excellency said that Ghana has made monumental progress in formalizing the economy and digitizing government services. Mr. Speaker, there are very easy international standards for measuring digitization and its impact on the delivery of government services. When you digitize an economy and you formalize the economy, such as computerizing and improving port services delivery, such as improving land administration and how people can acquire land and register them, such as improving registration of vehicles at DVLA and licensing regime, such as improving the issuance of passports, it is very, very easy to determine the impact of those activities and to be able to tell whether there was success or not. Mr. Speaker, the World Bank has a very simple measure called the ease of doing business. When you computerize government services, you reduce the bureaucracy and eliminate human intervention in the delivery of government services, which in turn...
Member, hold on.
I was making the point that when you undertake digitization and formalization of your economy, particularly in relation to digitization and formalization of government service delivery, what you do is to substitute human intervention with electronic means of delivering the same service, and that should lead to a lower cost of transacting the same business, so that it should cost less to take goods out of the port when you computerize the port. And all that is measured through the World Bank's own ease of doing business. And Mr. Speaker, the performance of this government under the World Bank ease of doing business makes mockery of any talk of digitization and formalization of the economy. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, we performed 118 points on the ease of doing business. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, we did the same 118. In 2018, we performed at 114. And Mr. Speaker, in 2017, we did our worst at 120. And here, the lower the mark, the better. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, over the period, his worst performance was in 2016, and that was 108. And it is clear that John Mohammed's worst of 108 is better than Akufo-Addo's best performance of 140. And yet, the President says that His Excellency John Dramani Mohammed's economy was rudimentary, it was manual, it was not formalized delivering business services than the one that is digitized and formalized. Where do you see this type of analysis? Except under His Excellency the President, Nana Adongo Akufo-Addo. Again, Mr. Speaker, there is a major measure of the efficiency of digitization through what we call the Corruption Perception Index. And Mr. Speaker, Corruption Perception Index, as I referred to, is different from the Afro Barometer, which talks about political corruption, such as PDS and the rest. This talks about how businessmen who operate in Ghana and other countries, such as multinationals, have to pay bribes in order to transact business in other countries. And always the Transparency International allows these business executives to evaluate where they spend more bribes in order to access the same service. So how much bribes do they pay to clear 40-footer container from the port of Ghana compared to Nigeria, compared to South Africa and Zimbabwe? And Mr. Speaker, our performance under His Excellency the President is very shocking. Mr. Speaker, the worst performance of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama was 43 in 2016. The best performance of Nana Adongo Akufo-Addo was in 2020, and it is 43. So John Mohammed's worst performance in the Corruption Perception Index, which shows the efficiency of digitization, is Nana Adongo Akufo-Addo's best. So what level of digitization is this? Mr. Speaker, His Excellency, the former president, actually chalked 46, 45, and 48 between 2012, 2013, and 2014. And yet, his economy was not digitized. But the one that digitized now had a performance of 43, which is the best. And so it is quite clear that something is not adding up. Ghana's economy is retrogressing. We are failing in terms of ease of doing business because digitization only exists in the minds of some people. We are failing in terms of eliminating bureaucratic corruption by public servants and civil servants who transact government business using government portals. And yet, we are touting this shocking performance as a proper performance that we should be celebrating. Mr. Speaker, we have celebrated mediocrity for just too long. And the people of Ghana now deserve action other than rhetoric. We now deserve action other than big English. And at the end of the day, the end result is not reflecting in the performance of the government. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency said that he is now in the second year of Rose. In the first year of Rose, where he said he had performed better in terms of infrastructure, my own big brother, His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, taught me one thing when he was in opposition. He said that the best way to measure the investment in infrastructure is to relate infrastructure expenditure to GDP. And at that time, he was not happy that we were doing 4.5% capital investment to GDP. Today, His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and the President are doing 1.8% of capital investment. And that is the year of growth. Then if we were not in the year of growth, what will we be doing? Quite clearly, the mediocrity and talking positivity into what is clearly a negative, less leadership regime must stop. And at the end of the day, the people of Ghana want to see a government that performs, not a government that talks through its mediocrity. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.